Don't miss this episode of Tiny Little Victories, Massive Talk, where poetry meets passion, and every word leaves you longing for more. We're delving into the enchanting world of poetry with the incomparable Jennifer Kite-Powell as a guest instead of host. Join us in getting to know her other side.
Hey folks, it's Jennifer Kite-Powell, your host of Tiny Little Victories and Massive Talk, and I thought I would sneak in here before this episode starts, where Nose took over the entire episode, and just talk a little bit about poetry. First of all, Americans aged 18 to 34 are the only group that reads poetry over the national average. It says here, 17.5% of people aged 18 to 24 read poetry at least once a year. Once a year? Come on, those are terrible statistics. And 12.3% of people 25 to 34 doing the same. But only 9.9% of people between 45 and 54 read poetry books at least once a year. Honestly, I don't believe this is true, because a lot of people I talk to read poetry more than one time a year. So I don't think that's true. Now, one more thing I'm going to add before Nose jumps in here and takes over the podcast is the most popular poet to date is Rumi. He's popular in Turkey, Azerbaijan, and South Asia, and has become the best-selling poet in the United States. So hey there, if you ever want to get your poetry on, get a couple of books by Rumi, because first of all, they're absolutely beautiful. They're also quite romantic, and they can be very ethereal and a little bit sexual, dare I say? Yes. So there you go, Rumi, the best-selling poet in the United States. And now I'm going to leave so Nose can take over Tiny Little Victories, Massive Talk.
Welcome to Tiny Little Victories, and we have another episode of Massive Talk with a co-host, me, Nails Wilbrink, and Jennifer Kite-Powell.
Woohoo! In the house with Massive Talk. I'm loving this show already, you guys.
Yes, because today is about you.
Well, you know what? Okay, let's do it.
Definitely. I'm just going to introduce you here as
Okay.
if you're a guest on your own show. How about that?
You know what? That's so meta, and I absolutely love it, because why not? And
Why not?
so we just want to tell everybody that you and I have spent a lot of time lately, really I don't want to tell the listeners, we have spent a lot of time for you guys doing a lot of research and creation of very cool topics, very obscure topics, and thinking about people that could come in as a guest to talk about some of these topics. And we literally have spent hours and hours and hours on the phone creating like this format just for you. And we came up with this. Actually, this is Nose's idea yesterday. So we're mixing it up a lot. And I think that's what Massive Talk is all about. It's like mixing things up a little bit.
Absolutely. I think it's great. And there's so much positive energy from this. And I'm really looking forward to some of the guests if they all say yes. No, I mean when they say yes.
When they say yes, they're going to. Because just, you and I yesterday, just so everybody knows, we really wanted to get like this guy who's like the son of a super famous person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it could be possible. But we're really thinking of some really great people and some interesting people with names like Muffy, which I think would be a very cool guest.
Absolutely.
I know you're going to laugh.
Mm-hmm. I'm not laughing. You're laughing.
Yeah. So.
Good. Well, I'm just going to kick it off because I'm going to introduce you as if you were unknown to the public, because maybe there are things that people don't know about you.
Oh, I hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Here it goes.
Okay.
Jennifer Kite-Powell, you are a multifaceted individual, known for your work as published author, a speculative poet, a flash fiction writer, a tech journalist. You've authored 2 notable books on poetry and hybrid story poems titled Love, Lust, Longing, and Truth, and the other one is Deluge in a Paper Cup, both of which have garnered positive reception. And in those, what I found really nice is your writing style was a blend of a stream of consciousness and then really aimed at evoking emotion and transporting the readers into specific feelings or memories.
Oh, I love that. I like that. Yes, you can write my next book's back cover.
Awesome. I love that. I have more, but actually, because we are talking more about poetry, I would like
Yeah.
to start off with that. Like,
Okay.
what drew you to poetry in the first place?
I love that you want to talk about this because I absolutely love, love, love poetry for so many reasons. And just for a long time, I was a closeted poet.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't really tell anybody that I wrote poetry. I would keep it to myself, or I would just jot it down and I would toss it aside. And feeling like it wasn't a medium that I was qualified to write. Uh, but I always loved it, right? I loved one of my favorite poets. He's an author, but he's also a poet, is Bukowski, Charles Bukowski. And I had like had under my little arm like one of his books, Love is a Dog from Hell, like all through college. And
Mm-hmm.
after college, it was tattered and torn, and I would read it religiously. And I felt so drawn to the way he wrote as a poet, as a man, as a human. It's also very stream of consciousness that I feel like I realized like, well, this is how I think anyway. This is how I feel anyway. So I just sort of kept to myself until one day a friend of mine actually picked up my notebook and she said, "What is all this?" And I said, "Oh, they're poems that you, these are amazing." So I think sometimes it takes somebody else to push you out of the closet
Mm-hmm.
to be able to come to the table and say, "Yes, I'm a poet." And now I'm very happy to sit down and very happy to claim, like, yes, I'm a poet. So that's number one. Number two, what drew it to me is because there's so much truth in poetry. They're stories, they're tiny stories. They're little tales of how somebody felt or what somebody saw or the feeling of equating your movements or your emotions to nature or to I love as you know, I write about technology as well, and
Mm-hmm.
I love turning the body into um, a vessel for a poem, because you think about our respiratory system and how our lungs work, and then when you meet somebody for the first time, you cannot control your body, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can't breathe, your stomach's turning over, it's like 1,001 butterflies or in your tummy. And I love the idea of creating emotion, a very visceral moment for the reader based on something I experienced, as I could tie it back to the idea that our bodies are just machines. And I think that is sort of the freedom of poetry, is that there's no right or wrong, right? It's just about expression. And if you think of, Bob Dylan was a poet before he became a musician. All of his things are poems. And they're beautiful, right?
Yeah.
It's how he was expressing himself. And I'm gonna like shock people here and say George Michael is also one of my very favorite artists ever. May he rest in peace.
I'm shocked.
And
No, I'm
I
not.
know. and and you know what I love about him is that his very early works, like when it was before Wham even jumped the pond and came over here, because we didn't know about them. But if you really read some of his lyrics from the Wham rap, the original Wham rap, it was written by them at a time, a very tumultuous time in the UK, when all these youths were unemployed and they were mad at the government, and he was one of those, on the dole, as they say. And you
Mm-hmm.
listen to Wham rap now and you can hear him talking about the man, and keeping you down, but we don't care because we're going to do what we want. Like, it's like a ballad, it's a poem, a testament to like how they were feeling at the time. And I think poetry does sort of mark an epoch. It marks a time. It marks, a genre in a way. It's like if you read any Rilke, he'll describe somebody at the end of the light of the beautiful field at the end of the train tracks as her turning around her incandescent light in her umbrella and walking away, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
what he's
Mm-hmm.
saying is that I can't have her. She's leaving. But that was so sexy, like at the time. That's like ooh la la.
Yeah. However, that's not how you write, in a sense.
No, no, no.
No, you are, because I want to bring it back to how
Yeah.
you do it, because it is very erotic, and you just said about the
Mm,
truth and writing that, and it being in
yeah.
the body. So is that something that is that what you felt when you were writing
Yes.
this? You wrote this in,
Yes.
when was it, 2017, right? The
Yeah,
first one.
27. So I guess I wrote most of that book in 2015 to 16. It came out in 2017. It took a while, but yes, I think the Love, Lust, Song, and Truth is an extremely visceral sort of erotic book. I mean, there was a review by it saying it was erotic. And the only time I got too close to the line was in a specific poem that I had written. And I guess, I guess I did feel, I know I did. I didn't guess. All of these things are literally actually feelings that I had about men, about how
Hmm.
I was feeling about men, about some of the sadness that was going on in my life, about the big feelings that you keep inside that maybe you don't even tell your best friend. Because sometimes, when you're going through something, friends are like, okay, here we go again.
Yeah.
But actually, when this book came out and I did the reading in New York, I had so many men actually come up to me
Hmm.
and say, "Oh my God, that's how I feel. I feel that way." And
Wow.
and it was beautiful because if to me a man can say, "I'm feeling that way," but I could never admit it. I feel like that my words either went into somebody's, body and soul, and they were able to feel like they weren't alone in a way. And I don't think we are that separated. There's a thin veil between our emotions and being in love and losing somebody and
Hmm.
like feeling bad about what you did with somebody, or, a carnal twist in a gin soaked hotel room in Paris. And I think the smell of cigarettes from ashtrays, like these were very visceral moments for me,
Yeah.
but I can't imagine I was the only person that ever had them.
No, I don't think so. I think it's the recognition of people that that brings it to life. That's what I was wondering, because you didn't write them to be published, did you? You wrote them because
No,
Peter Jackson started off saying like the most honest form of filmmaking is to make a film for yourself. He says
absolutely. I
if you
love
start
that.
making it for others, then you get all the junk you get now in the cinemas. But if people go back
That's
to the
so true.
form of art for themselves, you would get something
Yeah,
way more valuable.
I
Yeah, but
love that.
go ahead. The question that I wanted to ask in that is like,
Mhm.
is it the first album? I want to say the first book. You probably wrote these to cope with things, if that's fair to say.
Absolutely. 100%. Absolutely way of processing what was happening to you, a way to vent,
Hmm.
a way to be angry at a situation that I was actually going through. I had finished a divorce at that time, but at the same time, I was madly in love with somebody at the same time.
Hmm.
And so I think there was a lot of emotions there. I think, I, there's a lot of passion in this book, I think, for myself and what I was going through. So I
I
think
love that.
there's,
The passion for yourself. That's great.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I don't know if sometimes we forget about that, to have passion for ourselves, right? Oh, today the word they use is grace. But come on, like, let's have some passion for who we are as a person. And, there was a moment where I remember I was sitting in LA, I was on the beach, and I was staring out at the water, and I had just come off this big, like, work thing. And I
Hmm.
think I'd had a meeting with somebody about this book that did not go well. And I was just sitting there looking, and I was thinking about food. And I was thinking about like Cheese Whiz. Do you know
Mm.
this? It's like this really awful thing we have in America where it's in a can and you press down a plastic button and gooey cheese comes out.
Oh,
It's
I heard
absolutely
about this.
terrible.
Has nothing to do with cheese.
No, it's
No, it's foul.
absolutely horrible.
But you
And at the
loved it.
same, yeah, I loved it. But at the same time, I was always thinking about holy wafers. So I'm not a religious person at all, but I have been in a church, and there are these really thin, like, I don't know what they're made of, like rice paper
Sure.
crackers, really thin. Anyway, you go into church, and then somebody does something, a guy says something, and then you're supposed to like eat the body of Christ, which is
Hmm.
this wafer. And for some reason, I was sitting there on the beach, and I was really hungry, and I was like, "What if you put holy wafers and cheese whiz together? Like, what would that be like?" So I wrote this poem called "Holy Wafers and Cheese Whiz" that ended up in the book, and it was one of the poems that I read at the book opening signing. And I had, again, despite the other things about, oh, I didn't feel that way, I had people come up to me about this poem, and I was like, that poem almost didn't make it in the book because it was just me rambling on about like how holy wafers are an unholy marriage, of this D plus science project and home economics class. And it's like, they're salty, but they're bland, they're gummy and they're crisp. And it was just this very big poem about how dysfunctional they are. You can't put anything on them because they're
No.
so thin.
Yeah. If that was the body of Christ, I don't think that's a very good body.
Right. I can read it if you want. It's actually a very funny poem. It's
Yes.
really funny. Can I
Yes.
read it really quickly? Okay.
Absolutely.
It's page 86 of the first book, Love, Lust, Longing, and Truth. I don't know how I got to this, but it is now one of my favorite poems. Holy wafers and cheese whiz. I'm pretty sure the body of Christ should taste better than a holy wafer. Holy wafers are unholy marriage of a D+ science project meets home economic class under the bleachers on a Friday night. It's very American. Salty yet bland, gummy yet crisp. It's a stupendously dysfunctional wafer. It can't even sustain any pressure from a topping except Cheese Whiz. It sticks to the roof of your mouth, which reminds you of Captain Crunch cereal, which also sticks to the roof of your mouth, but hurts more. It doesn't even go with red wine. A white would be better. At least it's gluten-free.
I love it. I love it.
So, I mean, that's a stream of consciousness poem, but it popped into my head. And like you said, I hadn't planned on these, but as they came out and people began helping me editing them and reorganizing them, I was like, where the hell does that poem go? Like what
Yeah.
section of the
So
book? Truth.
I want to ask you about that. So is there a difference between the poems you wrote for yourself and the poems
Mm,
you wrote later knowing there would be a book?
no, I
No.
don't think I ever wrote them thinking there would be a book. I always wrote them for myself. I
Yeah.
do think there's a tonal difference between the first book and the second book. They're a little bit longer. They're more, short story poems. I think maybe that developed with time, but I never write for the public. I never
No.
write for anybody but myself.
Yeah. What is because the second book was also in the pandemic already, right?
Yes, it was. Yes, it's actually a chat book. I had wanted to do a chat book. Everybody was doing a chat book. It's just a chat book is a very old Victorian, thing where people would write. Actually, a lot of the famous writers who couldn't get book deals at the time, D.H. Lawrence, a whole bunch of other people would write these little chat books and then they would send them off to their agent or publisher as a taste of what could be. And hey, if it didn't get published, you could sell it for like 10 cents, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're really short, like 12 to 15 um, poems that this was written, was supposed to come out. And then the pandemic came and ended up doing anything with it publicly, which was a disappointment.
Mm.
But I actually really love the poems in this book. There's only 15 of them, and some of them are quite long. So I call them very short, like very flash fast
Shorts.
fiction stories. Yeah, short
Yes.
stories. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a different theme? The first
It
one
feels,
being
yeah.
more bodily, and the second one.
I think the second one is still pretty bodily. I mean,
Hmm.
I think that they are very representative of a journey or searching that I've been on, this quest about, understanding who you are and then who the people are in your life and then having their presence in your life, long distance or not long distance, and how that influences you. I think this book has a lot of dreams in it that have
Hmm.
been repurposed. There's a poem called Dreaming Like Escher in here that was
Oh,
about,
I haven't
yeah,
read that one,
about,
but it sounds really
oh,
nice.
it's kind of long, but thank you. I love Escher paintings. And
Yes.
it was really about the lust or passion that I had for somebody at the time, but we were just friends.
Hmm.
And so it was me as my way of sort of immortalizing this young person.
Oh, wait,
In
love like Escher. So you get this endless
yeah,
loop of being friend zoned,
yes,
and oh my
yes,
God, that's awesome. Yes.
yes. Oh,
Mm.
I love that. Yes,
Yes.
you got it.
Yeah.
And so, I think that book has a lot of that kind of like circles. Like I'm also trying to create I'm in my, I felt like I was in construction, under construction.
Hmm.
I was talking about how I don't think people like it when you change. And, is this thing plugged in? Like there's a poem, a very short, a verbal brick, I call them, which is basically just 3 or 4 lines in a poem. So there's a lot of that kind of comparison. I talked a lot about shards and people, you break a piece of glass, there's just pieces of shards. And I felt like someone that I had known was like that in their life, and they had come
Hmm.
into mind. I was just one of those shards. So I think, yeah, there's something in here about TikTok and just these kind of dismissed journeys that I was taking with people at the time, trying to understand everybody's behavior,
Was it
which
other
is kind.
people's behavior or your behavior?
Um, well, I think everything's related, right? So in a way, it was. I think a lot of it was how I didn't feel seen at the time,
Right.
and so I was in these relationships with people, and then I was writing about why can't they see me? Why don't they
Hmm.
understand who I am? But so I think it is about other people, but I think when you're trying to work through something, and I do really love, this chat book a lot because I feel like it's really raw in that it to me, it really is more exposing than the first book of who I am. I don't feel like sometimes I read it and I feel like I sound so great in this book,
Mm.
like I sound petty sometimes, but I feel like that's a good thing, like in sharing. And there's this book did not get the book
Opening.
debut yeah,
Yes, that it
but I
needed.
did a lot.
Hmm.
Yeah, I did a lot of stuff online with this book, and but there's a poem in here, that a long poem actually, called 18 minutes, that
Hmm.
is the last long short story poem in the book, and that poem was something that really spoke to somebody who liked it so much that they asked if I would think about turning that into a book or a movie.
Oh.
And yeah, so this poem came from a conversation with a person who had experienced a trauma in Mexico and shared his story with me. He was a photographer, and it was very painful to listen to him. You could tell he was still like extremely tore up by what happened to him. He was kidnapped by one of the cartels. He
Oh.
was turned loose. Yeah. And he told me this story. And as he was telling me this story, all I could see was a whole nother story.
Hmm.
And so 18 minutes became literally the base for one person that he told me about that he met for a split second. And she just became alive in the story. So 18 minutes became this big, like, platonic love story between this kidnapped photographer who was broken and then this young girl who saw nothing but hope in the world, right? She didn't see anything stopping her, but she was
Hmm.
in, and that then became a bigger story, which became a treatment for a film, which somebody purchased. And now that is sitting on my desk as a screenplay that I have to write. So I
No
think this
way.
book was a journey. Yeah.
That is pretty awesome. I didn't
Yeah.
know that about you. Here,
Aha,
I'm learning things.
surprise.
Yes.
Yes. So that book was a journey for me, I think, in that, I really love it, but I didn't expect that. And I think because of um the way 18 minutes turned out in this book, it became a story. Like, I think when you read
Right.
it, and that's what this person who got a hold of the book read it and said, I can see this as a film. And so I'm like, really? What? But then you can see it. And it was actually quite easy to expand it from this to the treatment for the film, which is basically like a very long short story or a very short book. A
Yes.
treatment, I learned. I did not know. I had to learn. I was like, what is this? And that was a really great experience for me because I feel like I am a prose writer. I'm not a script writer or a screenwriter,
Hmm.
but I had a lot of help and people saying, just write it. Just write what you know, right? Just write it.
So are we on a 3-year cycle? Is it because
I think, yeah.
you're doing 15, 16, producing it in
Yeah.
17, then you're
Yeah.
writing and then
Oh, you're
releasing in
right.
2020,
You're right.
and now we're at
Yeah.
2023. So what's up in the
Yes.
next 3 years?
Yeah. So there's two things. I love that you asked that. There is the book called Thrust, which has always been in my brain.
Okay,
Um,
so trust, as in trust, or
thrust,
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 as in
thrust.
what an airplane does?
Sure. What an
There we
airplane
go.
does.
Yes.
What an airplane does to get moving, what people do in life to encourage themselves to go forward,
Hmm.
what, you could do in a
In bed.
intimate moment. Yes. Yes, in bed. I think that's one of the things I like to break down is the word lust, for example, doesn't
Mhm.
always have to mean sex. Like, you can
No.
have a lust for raising sustainable food, or, doing podcasts, or piloting a gigantic commercial jet in the
Hmm.
air. And I don't, lust is less can be so many things. And so thrust is also many things. And thrust is a book that has been in the back of my mind for a long time. And it wasn't until I had the confidence from the first book and then the chat book, which had to
Mm-hmm.
definitely get out, that I began to see the purpose of thrust. And it formed for me on this teeny tiny island off the coast of Senegal and Portugal, called Saul Island. And it was this windswept pancake of a place.
You
And
went there as a writer's retreat, or did
I
you?
went there with Adobe
Mm.
to moderate some of their executive creative sessions. It
Mm-hmm.
was a shit show. I mean, I'll just say that. It was,
You can say it. You can say it.
yeah, I can say whatever I want.
Yes.
And it was a really bad experience in terms of that, but I was so taken in by the island and absconded in a way by the absolute beauty of this barren island in the middle of these other islands that were very lush, and found myself in a riad with a bunch of surfers from all over the world run by a crazy Italian couple. And you could sit down, and if the wind would come in, it'd be this wind coming down, you'd have like these rotten bananas for breakfast. And
No.
everybody else was staying in these really posh places in the touristy part of this little rickety island. And I was literally in the ghetto of this
Mm.
island, like where real people lived. I should not say ghetto. I'm going to have to beep that out. But it was where real people lived. And
So you were in a part of the island. What part of the island were you in?
God, I can't even remember the name of this place. I'll have to look that up and add that back in. But it was like 20, 30 miles from the airport. It was a little
Mm-hmm.
town there. And on one side of the island was like the Hilton and the Hyatt. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Hilton and Hyatt. And then this other part of the town was where regular people lived.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, everyone said, oh, you can't stay there. You can't stay there because it's going to be bad for you. You're going to be kidnapped. You
Where
don't
were
eat
going
out
to
of
take
the,
you off the island?
yeah, where are we going to go? There's like one flight in and out like 3 times a day.
Yeah.
And I think what happened was that sitting in this dusty riad, I realized that I was here for a reason. And I was here, not, okay, the Adobe thing, whatever, that didn't go great.
Mm-hmm.
But I allowed myself to just let go. And I noticed that everybody sort of around in the neighborhood, even the surfers, and they would get in little cars in the morning and go off to this part of the island where there's all the windsurfing, which I also ended up doing to watch. But I noticed that everybody locally kind of went barefoot. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to do it too. So I went barefoot. I just regular shorts and a dumb old t-shirt. And I speak enough French, and there are a lot of people there speak French. And I found people so welcoming. They're like, come, like putting their arm around me, come in and eat. Well, the one thing everyone says, don't eat the food,
Mm-hmm.
only eat at a hotel. And I was like, no, I'm going to eat here. And had these great conversations with people. They would have all they eat, like fresh chicken and then like boiled vegetables. They had the vegetables brought in from another island or from Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to feel it. And so there were these mines there that were salt. They used to mine salt. That's why it's called Saul Island, SAL. And my little driver said, I'm going to take you out here where you can float in these salt flats, but it's all abandoned. And it was like this beautiful, like big wooden structures with a rusty iron that looked like portals and gates to another world. And then you'd walk up in there and he goes, you're fine, you're fine. And I'd be like, oh my God, am I going to be kidnapped? Am I going to die? Like, what's
Mm-hmm.
happening? And you enter through these beautiful, almost Peter Jackson type portals, and you're inside of what looked like a hollowed out volcano where all of these former salt flats were. And you could just walk down in there and like float in the salt. And I was
Wow.
floating, looking at this driver sitting there watching me, checking his clock. Like I thought, I don't know this guy. I don't know this guy at all.
You
But
don't know
this is the
nothing.
most amazing experience. I know nothing, right? And he came over and brought me a towel and he said, do you want to see something else? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I really became so free there. I started scribbling, writing. He had to take me to a store and find a notebook. I was just like writing nonstop. Of course, I did run into a man who was also just crazy photographer off the beaten path. And he showed me a lot about the island that I didn't know either. He had snakes in his head.
I need
But he was
I need to ask you a question about that.
Okay.
So, are certain type of men muses to you? Is
Yes.
that your
Yes.
feed off it?
100%. Yes.
Ah,
I'm only admitting this to you out loud for the first time
yep.
ever.
Mm.
Confessions, true confessions.
And is it always the same type, or do you go for different ones?
They're always a little bit like not on the regular path. So I
Hmm.
guess there's that there's that about them. There's something a little bit they're on their own path, I think. They're willing to be free and like not follow conform to things, although maybe when they go back home they conform. I don't know. Yeah.
Because you have
Yeah.
that side back and forth as well. Because I mean,
Yeah.
what I haven't said is how you are a big name in tech journalism, senior editor for Forbes. You write about technology and science and impact on culture and environment and all that.
I'm an
And
anomaly.
at the same time, yeah, you have this. Oh yeah, and the whole AI VR element that you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And at the same time, and which is very conformist and very, it has to be this way, and it's a white man's world in a way still.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
on this end of the spectrum, you have this bolstering. I don't know what's the right word. I'm not.
That's good. I think that's a good word.
Hmm.
Well, it's very different, right? Like that's what I talk about out of the closet. Like, can I be that person and can I be this person? Can I be this woman that needs a male muse and like finds herself walking barefoot on a tiny pancake island, and then meeting somebody that's so willing to like dance with like an Indonesian scarf in the wind,
Right.
and like who is that person? So I think it's a struggle. It used to be. I don't feel like it is now. So I would sort of keep that under wraps.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Because you don't want people to think, "Who is this wanton writer out there?"
Uh,
Yeah.
yes. So, but you have the same thing then, and I'm just making this connection between your time in
Yeah.
France, which is very
Yeah.
French, and now
Yes.
you're in Texas, which is very
Ugh,
Texan.
Texan.
And they are not
Totally.
necessarily the same thing.
No, thank you for bringing that up. Yes.
Hmm.
Oh,
Uh,
that's struggle.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is that something? So no muses in Texas?
No, I have zero muses in Texas, which is a real problem for me,
Hmm.
except that because um yeah, yes, I have no muses. So I think maybe possibly why there might have been a gap. And I think there's a lot of work on Substack and Medium that just sort of like popcorned out of me, when I felt, okay, I got to channel something, right? I got
Hmm.
to close my eyes. And I always picture myself in some sort of house of mirth, type, laying on a velvet sofa with her hand over her head, with her gown around her feet, like smoking a really long cigarette or something sort of tragic in the
Yes.
perfect sense of the word, tragic, to evoke like those feelings of like lust and passion and sort of the headiness of being lost in Europe and floating around in Rotterdam and smelling the briny harbor and falling in love with a man who, smells like cigarette smoke and terre de Hermes. It's like,
Hmm.
no, that definitely doesn't happen in Texas. And that concerns me, but there's nothing I can do except go back and relive those moments to bring that muse back, which is exactly what I've been doing, which
Hmm.
is exactly why I think the new work is so good.
And the new work is, you post this. Now people can just go online and read it.
Yeah. Yeah,
You've
and
got a
I
Substack. We'll put the links in the
yeah.
description and
Okay.
everything.
Yeah.
Yes, right?
Okay.
And
Yes.
Medium.
Yeah,
Yes.
totally.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, totally medium. And one of the things that I wanted to say was thank you because you would say, "Oh my God, you're finally on Substack." I'm like, "Yeah, I've been lurking there for a while." Yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
because
For some reason, I like that
poetry,
better.
you never.
Substack. I don't know why.
Oh, I love. Can we just? Yes, I love
Yeah.
Substack. It's a completely different group of
Yes.
readers on Substack than that are on Medium.
Hmm.
Completely. And I absolutely love that because I really enjoy Substack. My readers are better, the claps are better, people comment more. Or on Medium, like, okay, nice job. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, they probably want a business piece. But I love Substack and my column, my place where I'm putting some of the new work, not all the new work, is called And Other Stories.
Hmm.
And I love the response that I get on Substack, and it's so
Yeah.
liberating, actually. So, yeah.
That seems that way. So I would like you to read one of your newer poems. But before
Okay.
we do that, Um,
Hmm?
is there anything else that I've missed, or something that is
God,
dying for you
no.
to say? Something that you still feel you need
You're
to?
so No, you've asked such great questions. And I think the last time I was interviewed about poetry was by another Dutchman
Hmm.
in at Schiphol, at a hotel next to Schiphol. And we had like, an hour and a half. It was for his podcast. It's
Hmm.
called Dim. And it was, he was like, poetry, why? But I think I love it that two Dutchmen have interviewed me about poetry.
Poetry.
Hmm.
Oh, is there a
Interesting.
theme?
I don't know. I may have to
Oh,
write a poem about that.
oh,
No,
cool.
I think, you know what? I love that you asked about it. I love that you want to know about it because I really do believe that poetry can touch people. And I don't write like Rilke. I don't write like super romantic poets. That's true. My idol is Bukowski for sure, and a collection of other smaller poets that have, like one or two books out. But I do think that when you read it and people listen, they're like, that's a poem.
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
and I love that. And I was at physical therapy the other day, and I was talking about how I had lost somebody close to me, and I had written this poem, and this older woman that was in there had lost her husband a few years ago, and she's
Mm.
always saying, are you lonely? Do you feel like you're lonely? I go, no, I'm not lonely. She's, I feel so lonely. And I said, don't be lonely, let me read you something.
Oh.
So I stopped and read her um, this poem that I had written in sort of remembrance of this person that is now passed that I loved. And she stopped. And then her therapist came over and stopped. And then two other patients stopped. And then my therapist, who's like a jock, he
Hmm.
stopped. And I read it, and she had these little tears in her eyes. And she reached out and she said, I can feel everything and smell everything. And her therapist said, oh, that's poetry. And I was like, yeah, guys, that's poetry.
Yeah,
And it was such an unlikely place, physical therapy room with people stopping their little lifts and stuff to
I think
listen.
that
I
is
thought that was,
exactly. I think that's exactly where your poems come to shine, because it's a stream of
thank you.
consciousness. It is that. It's
Thank
that
you.
those places that you don't. It's not a library where you do a reading.
No,
It
no,
is
no,
that.
no.
It's
And I
that
never,
harsh.
never, yeah, yeah. I never loved that part, actually. That was always stressful. Somebody asked me here to come in and do a reading here in Dallas. And I said, okay, I don't feel like my poems should be read out loud. They were like, what? Everybody does it. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to do it. Like, I feel like if I pick this up, like some of these are kind of long. If I look at these poems, I feel like that I'm
People need to read
forcing.
it in their own pace. They need to
Yes, in their
stop.
own mood,
Yes.
whatever's striking them at the time, because that's what I don't think we do as humans. Like, let's just stop and take a breath before the plunge and think like, where's your mood? How do you feel? And I think if people, plus also people hate my voice. That's part of the problem with having other people read their poems out loud. You're like, ooh, I don't want to hear that. It's the first
I,
time I ever heard Dharma Bum read by, I can't remember who the reader was. It's like, no, that's not how he sounds.
oh my God. I
Yeah.
think your voice is great, and you have a
Oh, thank
podcast,
you.
and it should be known.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's true.
Yes. So I was looking at pointy things, but you also
Okay.
made me curious on the other poem. I don't know if you want to either
Hmm.
read pointy things, or if you want to take
I
a
would love
moment.
to. You said you like pointy
I
things, and I
do.
would love to read it. Okay.
It does
I
speak
don't
to
know.
me.
Why do you like pointy things?
I
Before I read it.
That is a very good question. I think I like the shortness of it, in the sense
Mm.
of as words that um, convey a certain power, and it kind of flows. It's like a wave. It's the words. Every
Oh, I
word
love that.
creates a wave, and that. Yeah, that resonates with me at the moment.
Oh, I really love that. Okay, I'm
Hmm.
going to read it, and I'm going to tell you that there's another poet. Her name is Bernadette Mayer. She is this New Englandy, crusty looking woman with crazy gray hair. And like, she is quite old now.
Hmm.
And she was a poet that had been around for a long time. I think her last book was produced in 2016. And she was just also very considered to be sort of avant-garde at the time. She doesn't care about fame. But I went to one of her book signings for Working Days, which was in Brooklyn when my book had come out in the same place that I read my book.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember her, I went up to her and I said, "Oh my God, there's a poem in there." I said, "I just love how it's basically just a list." And she said, "If you can make a list and that's a story that resonates with people, then you're a really fucking good writer."
Damn. That's
She's
good.
also yeah, no, she was great. I really admire her. And anyway, she I love reading her things, and I have a book here that's dog-eared and half chewed and torn up because I just love her stuff. But yeah, this is Pointy Things. Pointy Things. Boba tea straws, gladiola ends, canine teeth, red vines, neighbors who don't stop and talk to you as they walk past you on the sidewalk, tongues. Maybe those are forked. Dating apps, the soul of Elon Musk, the shard, the news, the climate, war, love, lust, nostalgia, pain, joy, recklessness, solitude, icicles, obviously. The exoskeleton of that cicada on my mailbox, Spock, truth, vagaries, this poem.
Yeah. This is exactly how I imagined it.
Yay!
Yes.
Okay, then we're winning.
Yes.
I actually know that I think it's good when your mother calls you and says, "Wow."
I will tell my mother to call me. Yeah.
You tell your mother to call you and say, "Wow," because I
Yeah.
don't think sometimes mothers get what we do, right?
No.
Sometimes they're like, "Why are you doing this again? Shouldn't you just get a real job or
Mhm.
pilot?" I mean,
Yeah.
I think,
I think she likes that I'm a pilot. I think that
oh
that
yeah, that's
makes
a
it
sexy
easier.
job. That's a
Yeah.
sexy job. People
Yeah.
like that. You
Yeah.
probably have cool aviator shades,
I do
and
actually. Yes.
you may have to write a poem up there in the friendly skies.
I will give it a go. I don't think
Okay.
I'll be a closeted poet for a while.
Okay, you
But
closet yourself, and then we'll
I'll,
bring you out here on the show.
exactly. I don't want to write for others. If I write, I want to write for me first.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is. I run into a lot of people who actually in Texas. So I did do a virtual reading, and this kid that works in a coffee shop in my neighborhood, because I live like in the city, and I went up to get coffee later, and he was all like shuffling about, like head down and just sort of weird. And I said, "Is everything okay?" And he goes, "I went to your poetry. I heard your, digital poetry reading." I go, "Oh, that's great." And he goes, I'm a poet." He goes, "I'm a poet too." Like, he like whispered to me across the counter. I'm like, "You're what?" He said, "Yeah, I write too." I go, "Well, why don't you send me some of your stuff and I'll look at it." He goes, "No, no, 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 no. Like, I'm not a poet. I'm not a writer." And I'm like, "Yeah, you
I'm a
are."
poet,
Like,
but no one does to know it. No.
exactly. No one needs to know it. But he was so, he's like, "I just don't think I could write like you. Like, you so, it hits you. It like touches you and it's so deep. And it's like, you can feel it and I can smell it." And I said, "Oh, you should send me a poem." Anyway, he did send me a few poems. They were really good. I
Yeah.
was like, "Whoa, dude, get that out there."
Yeah.
But can't make anybody do anything until they're ready.
No, and poems, then again, it is in the eye of beholder. A poem is not inherently good or bad, I think. It either
Completely. I
it
love
either
that. I
speaks to
love that.
you or it doesn't.
It
And if
doesn't.
it,
It's just like
yeah,
art.
yes,
Yeah.
great. Well, I want
Okay.
to thank you for opening up today and letting
Oh,
the listeners in
well,
on all that is you on this
well,
side.
thank you for prying me open today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Can we say that? I guess we can say that.
Yeah, it's a non-sexual way, right?
Yeah, I love that. It's a non-sexual way. It's a non-sexual way. Oh, this has got to be a topic then for later about why does everything have to always be people talk about sex if it's a man and a woman? Like, why? It's like Harry
True.
Met Sally. It's like, why?
Yes.
We should make that a podcast.
I think so because I have some business meetings that we did specifically with a man and a woman,
Okay.
always three of us,
All right.
because that way
Oh,
it
yeah.
was never a date, but we just wanted
Exactly.
to hang out.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah.
okay. Well, you're going to close us out. You're going to wrap out this episode and take us out of here?
I'm gonna take us out of here. I'm not really sure how to
Okay.
do a closing, but I want to say everyone thank you very much.
Bye. Just
Bye,
kidding.
and all the notes will be in the comments, and
Yeah, they will be.
the next episode is going to be amazing as well. I don't know what it's going to be,
Yes.
but it is
I
going to
think
be
it's going to
amazing.
be on, I think we're going to do it on sleep and dreaming.
Oh, yes. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Right?
Looking forward to it.
And I love you as the host. This is fantastic. I'll just like go have a glass of wine now. Say goodbye to everybody. Yeah, and
Enjoy.
thank everybody for listening. Yeah, and sharing, because one of the things these listeners are doing is they're doing some serious sharing. So thank you all for sharing.
Yes. Sharing is caring. Spread the word.
Sharing is caring, spread the word. Okay, on that
All right.
note, goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Okay, I can always edit. Hey folks, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode of Massive Talk with Nose Wilbrink as host. He's actually very good at hosting. Love his voice. So it's a good thing because I didn't take a poll, but yeah, I think he's very good at hosting. So you're going to be hearing a lot more of him on Massive Talk as a host alongside myself as we delve into issues that we hope that you will love. In fact, just a little sneak peek, we've been working on a number of episodes where we have a topic and we have some research that we found, some of it kind of nutty, some of it very serious. And actually we're bringing in a guest that can corroborate our theories because Nose and I have a lot of feelings and theories and feelings of things. And we've decided that, gosh, if we have these thoughts, maybe other people have them too. And I always thought it's a great idea because you, as the audience of listeners, could also write in some of the things that you would like to hear us talk about. And we would get a guest to come on and explain why we think your point is valid or not valid. Anyway, I think it's pretty cool. And another cool thing is just how much you guys share this podcast. Still so eternally grateful for all the sharing. And for those of you who haven't shared, go ahead and share. What's stopping you? And for everybody else, please go on Spotify or your favorite podcast platform and like us. You could leave us a comment. You can even suggest a topic and we will read those reviews online, much like Ali Ward does on Ologies, my hero. And just leave us comments. We'd really love to know because Tiny Little Victories is about stories. And we believe that everybody has a story to tell. So we would love to hear from you about the stories you'd like to tell or the stories you'd like to hear from people, right? Well, on that note, I think this is the last episode before the end of the year. And so we wish you all a very happy winter and a very happy holiday. And we'll see you next time on Massive Talk via Tiny Little Victories.